The day Clarissa held her dying husband's hand, she thought she was saying goodbye, but when a hidden letter surfaced, it wasn't a farewell. It was a command to live. What she didn't know was that Edward's final gift would shatter her grief, unveil a secret sanctuary, and lead her to a love she never saw coming. I stood by my husband Edward's hospital bed, his frail hand resting in mine, while the quiet hum of machines filled the sterile room. His once strong grip had grown weak, but he still managed to curl his fingers gently around mine, as if to reassure me that even in his final hours, he was still present. Edward's breathing was shallow, labored, and every rise and fall of his chest felt like a fragile thread tethering him to life. The doctors had already given me the speech, the one where they gently but firmly tell you to prepare for the inevitable. Still, no amount of preparation could soften the ache in my chest as I kissed his forehead, whispered, "I love you," and let my tears fall freely. I hadn't left his side for 3 nights, but exhaustion was finally overtaking me. The nurses, with their gentle voices and compassionate eyes, urged me to go home and rest. My heart resisted, but my body betrayed me. I agreed, reluctantly, hoping I'd return before Edward's final breath. As I walked out, each step away from him felt like a betrayal, as if I were abandoning him when he needed me the most. When I turned the corner, the murmur of voices near the nurse's station caught my attention. I slowed, not intending to eavesdrop, but Edward's name halted me in my tracks. "He's been asking for her every hour," one nurse said softly. Even when he couldn't open his eyes, he kept mumbling her name. The second nurse sighed, her tone laced with admiration and sorrow. "He asked us not to tell her how much pain he's in. He didn't want her to suffer more than she already is." My throat tightened, breath catching as their words pierced through my heart. Edward had been shielding me, even as his body failed him. He had been enduring silently, hiding his pain to protect me. I leaned back against the wall, overwhelmed by a mixture of love, grief, and helplessness. Then the first nurse added, "He gave us a letter for her. Said it was for after, when he's gone. Told me to keep it in the drawer with his things." A letter. My heart pounded as the weight of that revelation sank in. Edward had written me something, a final message, while his hands trembled and his voice faded. I couldn't ignore the pull. I turned back toward the nurses, composing myself as I approached. They looked up, surprised to see me. "I overheard," I admitted, my voice quivering. "Is there a letter?" The older nurse's expression softened. She walked to a nearby drawer and retrieved a sealed envelope. My name was scrawled across it in Edward's familiar handwriting. My fingers trembled as I took it, my heart racing. I moved to the waiting area, sitting down with the envelope resting on my lap, staring at it as if opening it would unravel me completely. Minutes passed. Finally, I slid my finger beneath the seal and unfolded the paper inside. His handwriting was shaky, but every word was filled with love. He thanked me for the life we'd built, for standing by him through every storm, and for being his light when the world grew dark. He wrote that he didn't want me to carry guilt or sadness. He wanted me to carry the memory of his love, and at the end, he asked me to do one thing: live. To find joy, to laugh again, to breathe deeply, and to embrace life even after he was gone. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed the letter to my chest. In that fragile piece of paper, Edward's spirit lived on. It was as if he were sitting beside me, holding my hand once more. I returned to his room, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. Edward's eyes were closed, but I took his hand and whispered, "I got the letter, my love." I told him I loved him again, louder this time, as if sheer will could bridge the gap between us. His lips twitched, forming the faintest hint of a smile. I stayed with him, never letting go of his hand until the final moment when his chest stilled and the machines fell silent. The days that followed blurred into one another. Grief settled over me like a suffocating blanket, heavy and unrelenting. The house felt emptier than I could have imagined. Every corner echoed with memories of Edward, our morning routines, late-night talks, shared glances that needed no words. I found solace in small things, a worn sweater that still carried his scent, the way sunlight streamed through our kitchen window just as it had when we shared coffee. But the letter became my anchor. I framed it and placed it on my bedside table, a tangible piece of Edward that I could turn to each night. It was his voice, reminding me to live, to not let grief consume me. Weeks passed before I ventured out beyond necessary errands. One sunny afternoon, I found myself walking through the park we used to frequent. The bench by the lake where we once sat feeding ducks felt like sacred ground. As I sat down, a woman nearby offered a gentle smile. She was sketching, her notebook filled with delicate lines that captured the scenery. We exchanged casual greetings, but there was a warmth in her presence. Her name was Amelia, an artist who frequented the park to find inspiration. Conversation flowed easily, and for the first time since Edward's passing, I felt a flicker of lightness. Amelia spoke of finding beauty in unexpected places, of how art was her way of holding on to fleeting moments. Her words resonated deeply. It wasn't long before our park meetings became a quiet ritual. She never pried, never asked about my grief, but her companionship was a balm. One afternoon, as golden light danced on the water's surface, Amelia handed me a folded piece of paper. "I sketched this for you," she said simply. It was a drawing of the lake, with a small figure seated on the bench, me. But beside me, faint and delicate, was the outline of Edward. It wasn't a ghostly image, but a tribute, as if Amelia had captured the invisible thread that still connected us. Tears welled up, but they weren't the crushing kind. They were soft, releasing, healing. "Thank you," I whispered, clutching the sketch as I had once clutched Edward's letter. The seasons began to change. Leaves turned amber and gold. My heart, too, began to shift. I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching reading to children. Their laughter, their innocence, became a daily reminder of life's persistent beauty. Months after Edward's passing, life found a rhythm again. The ache remained, but it coexisted with moments of genuine joy. I often thought of Edward during quiet evenings, sitting by the fireplace with a book. His letter had become a nightly ritual, my compass guiding me through the labyrinth of loss. It was during one of those evenings that the phone rang. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar yet kind. "Is this Clarissa Morgan?" she asked. "My name is Eleanor. I believe we need to meet." Eleanor explained that she had been Edward's lawyer. There were matters he had left for me to discover in time, things he had planned meticulously, knowing I would need something more tangible than memories to carry forward. We met the next morning in a quiet office downtown. Eleanor handed me a small box, along with a letter marked, "For Clarissa, when she's ready." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a key. "Edward purchased a small cottage by the sea," Eleanor explained. "He wanted you to have a place where you could breathe, where you could start anew. He called it your sanctuary." The drive to the cottage was surreal. Nestled by cliffs overlooking the ocean, the cottage was modest yet breathtaking. The sound of waves crashing against rocks was a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Inside, Edward had left touches of us everywhere, bookshelves filled with our favorite novels, framed photographs of our travels, and a music box that played our song. As I stood by the large bay window, watching the sun dip into the horizon, I felt Edward's presence so vividly that it brought tears to my eyes. He had given me more than a place. He had given me a future. A sanctuary not just built of walls and windows, but of love, memory, and hope. It was there, in that cottage, that I met Daniel. Daniel was a marine biologist who had a research station nearby. Our paths crossed when I found an injured seabird near the cottage and sought his help. He was kind, with a quiet strength that reminded me of Edward in some ways, yet was entirely his person. Our interactions began as simple conversations about marine life, but slowly they evolved. Daniel never filled Edward's space. He created his own beside it. He respected my past, never once trying to erase it. With him, I learned that loving again didn't mean forgetting. It meant expanding the heart's capacity. One evening, as we walked along the shore, Daniel shared his own story of loss. In that shared vulnerability, we found an unspoken bond. The sea, ever-changing yet constant, became our meeting ground. Years passed. Edward's letter remained on my bedside table, even in the cottage. I would read it often, feeling the warmth of his words, the strength of his love, guiding me still. The life he asked me to live had unfolded in ways I hadn't imagined. I had loved deeply, lost painfully, and found the courage to open my heart again. But the suspense of Edward's final letter, his carefully orchestrated plans, and the unexpected encounters had one more chapter. On the anniversary of his passing, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a journal, Edward's journal. He had documented his thoughts during those final months. Entries filled with reflections, hopes, fears, and above all, love. In those pages, he had written about me, about the life he envisioned for me, and even musings about someone like Daniel finding his way into my world. The realization that Edward had anticipated not just my grief, but my healing left me breathless. He had given me a roadmap, a final gift that transcended death. Love doesn't end. It transforms. It continues in different forms, in different hearts. As I closed the journal that night, I realized the story wasn't about saying goodbye. It was about carrying love forward, about living. Clarissa sat by the large bay window of the seaside cottage, the soft hum of waves mingling with the crackle of the fireplace behind her. In her lap rested Edward's journal, its worn leather cover warm beneath her fingertips. The last entry had been a letter not meant to instruct or warn, but to remind her of the life she was still meant to live. He had written about love, not as a possession, but as a gift that continued to grow even after goodbyes had been said. The sunlight stretched across the wooden floor, painting it in golden hues, and she could almost hear Edward's voice teasing her about how she always picked the seat with the best view. The thought made her smile. It was a real, gentle smile that did not carry the sharp sting of loss, but rather the soft ache of love remembered. She closed the journal and held it against her chest, breathing in deeply, as if she could absorb his presence through the pages. The sound of footsteps approaching the cottage did not startle her. She knew it was Daniel, returning from his morning at the research station. His knock was always the same, a polite tap followed by a pause, as if asking permission to step into her world. She rose and opened the door, greeted by his familiar warm smile and the scent of salt water that clung to him like a second skin. He held out a small bundle wrapped in cloth, revealing a delicate seashell, smooth and gleaming. He said it reminded him of her, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because it had weathered so much and still shone brightly in the light. Clarissa laughed softly, accepting the shell as another simple gift that held more meaning than words could capture. They sat together in the living room, no words necessary, just the quiet companionship that had grown between them, not as a replacement for Edward's space in her heart, but as an addition, a new chapter written beside the old. That evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon and the sky bled into shades of lavender and amber, Clarissa lit a single candle by the framed letter Edward had written. She whispered a thank you, not just for the cottage or the journal, but for loving her in a way that prepared her for a life beyond his own. Edward's final gift was not the letter or the home by the sea. It was the permission to keep living, to find beauty in the cracks of a broken heart, to let love evolve without guilt. As the candle's flame flickered, Clarissa knew she had found her peace. The grief would never vanish, but it had softened, transformed into a quiet reverence for the life they had shared and the new memories she was beginning to build. She looked out at the ocean, waves rising and falling in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, constant, enduring. The future was no longer a looming shadow but an open path, illuminated by the love that still guided her. Clarissa closed her eyes, breathed in the scent of salt and candle wax, and whispered the words Edward had written, this time as a promise to herself. Live. And she did.